Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Can I out you for how long it's been since you wrote a new blog?
I think it's been like 3 months or some
been a while.
Equivalently long, outrageous period of time.
Yeah. So we've got a new blog from Rachel, you guys.
I mean, just like hold on to your trousers. Is that a thing people say?
I think it's hold on to your butts.
I'm just giving myself away as an ancient. Hold on to your trousers. Oh, God.
Okay, so you have a new blog. What did you want to talk about?
The 2 different types of loneliness. I think there might be more than 2, but these are the 2 that I see people grappling with and actually bouncing back and forth and not realizing when they're experiencing one type of loneliness versus when they're experiencing the other. And then they're often doing the wrong thing with their loneliness. And so we got to talk about what it is when you're experiencing one versus when you're experiencing the other, and then what to do and what not to be doing when you're experiencing it, because it's really going to screw you over if you're doing the wrong thing.
I have some people in mind who I think are going to really need to hear this right now. So this is good timing.
I don't think this is going to be mind-blowing, but it might present it in a way that you haven't quite heard it said, which might help you contextualize it or just understand it or recognize it in yourself a little bit better, which is the goal, really. My goal is never to just like blow minds. It's more to just help you understand yourself a little bit better, but like drip by drip, not all at once.
Yeah. And I think a good blog is one that makes you go, oh, I knew that, but I hadn't really been paying attention to that. It just feels true and accurate and not even mind-blowing, but you haven't been doing it. It's just a good reminder. So, okay. Let's hear it.
The 2 kinds of loneliness and what to do about them. As an introvert, I love alone time. It recharges me and it keeps me sane. But alone is a different sensation than lonely. And all too often I felt lonely, even though I enjoy being alone. Being alone can be thrilling and energizing, mostly because it's a luxury that we don't always have when we live or work with other people. It's like going on vacation. The reason it's enjoyable is precisely because there's a time limit. Going on a permanent vacation would be boring and purposeless. But loneliness isn't at all dependent on who is or isn't physically around you. It's a form of isolation that you carry with you. Sometimes it's worse because you're surrounded by other people. So what is loneliness exactly? I think there are 2 major varieties, and understanding them is critical to knowing what to do about your loneliness, because there's definitely a wrong way to handle it. Social loneliness. I think there's an external and internal version of loneliness. I'll call the external version social loneliness, which basically means I wish I had more friends or family or romantic partnership in my life. Social loneliness is something we've all been through, and it's heartbreaking in its own right. Usually I encounter this in people who are pretty clear about who they are and what they value, but haven't yet found the right people to connect with, people who share their values and way of viewing the world. When you're experiencing social loneliness, it usually is appropriate to do something about it. Sometimes it means literally getting out into the world. So taking a class you're genuinely interested in, attending a meetup group, trying a dating app, or making a point to ask potential friends out to lunch. And often the getting out there is more emotional. So allowing yourself to be more vulnerable and exposed to people. For me, starting a podcast was a good exercise in emotional exposure. For others, that could mean deepening an existing relationship by having a hard but honest conversation, or letting go of perfectionist tendencies so that people have a chance to get to know and befriend the real you. By the way, this is literally how I made all of my friends. I met half of them when I was a coach in training, so I was in a space with people who definitely shared my deeper values and outlook on life, and the other half through my work as a coach. Many were my clients first, so again, we connected over shared values and a desire for honesty and vulnerability. Regardless of how you do it, the bottom line is this. Social loneliness is usually remedied by you making a consistent effort to vulnerably and honestly expose yourself to the kind of people and places, real or virtual, where you're likely to find shared values, perspectives, and truths. But what about existential loneliness? If social loneliness is external, as in it's something that you remedy in large part outside of yourself, then existential loneliness is internal. It actually can't be remedied on the outside. I think of existential loneliness as a void, a disconnection between you and anything that can feel profound even if it doesn't look that way on the outside. Existential loneliness can look like feeling like no one understands or can relate to you, like your very identity sets you apart from other people even if you wish it didn't. Related to that, it can feel like having goals or dreams that other people just straight up cannot fathom. Like you're speaking an alien language that the people around you cannot understand at all. It can feel like not trusting that the universe has your back, feeling unsure if there's anything bigger or wiser than you that you can rely on. Feeling devoid of meaning and purpose, having no idea what the point of life is or what you're here to do. And it can feel like uncertainty about your future, feeling like there's nothing concrete you can count on. It's heavy, deep, and intangible. It's fundamentally wound up in the fabric of your identity. And for that reason, you cannot solve it outside of yourself. But that's not for lack of trying. A friend called me recently in tears. She and her long-term partner had broken up a few months previously, and she thought she was on stable footing. But she'd gone to an event that evening that made her feel lonely, which can happen easily when you're single and surrounded by happy couples. And all of her emotional stuff was coming up again. She said, I almost called that new guy I went out with last week just so that I could have someone to connect with. But instead, I called you. The loneliness she was feeling in that moment may have looked more social. I mean, it's not wrong for her to want partnership in her life and to hurt over the absence of that. But her experience was actually more in the existential camp. Her breakup had her, as breakups tend to do, questioning all the fundamental identity questions. Who am I? What do I really want out of life? What does my future hold? What and who can I count on? She recognized in that moment that calling up the new guy would have been a social band-aid, a temporary distraction from a much deeper existential wound. She told me, I think I'm learning that I need to just sit with this loneliness. I don't need to try to fix it. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. But if I keep trying to distract myself with people and plans, then I'm probably never going to get what I need out of this experience. What you do with your loneliness matters. I share my friend's story because I know it's far from unique. We feel the cold, void-like pull of existential dread, and because it's scary AF, we often reach for a distraction that feels warmer and safer. That's why so many people are convinced that when I get a new job, then I'll be happy, or when I find a romantic partner, then these feelings will dissipate. But how do you actually do what my friend said? How do you sit with it and not try to fix it or distract yourself? Does that mean you do nothing? That doesn't seem right either. And what if you don't know whether the loneliness you're feeling is social or existential? Well, here's my take on the last question. Assume it's the existential variety first, because you'll never be worse off for having done the work that easing existential loneliness requires. And what is that work exactly? How do we honor existential loneliness without slapping a Band-Aid over it? It boils down to a few things, all of which you can certainly work through on your own, but that are usually loads easier with help. This is the bedrock we get to with everyone in coaching. 1. Because existential loneliness is fundamentally a lack of connection with yourself, your purpose, your values, a higher authority, The first remedy is always to reestablish connection with yourself. The best way to start is by learning how to hone your intuition. If you want more on that, we had a side chat in June about exactly that subject. So scroll back to June 2019. Number 2, you've got to get clear on what these big, weighty things like purpose and meaning actually mean to you. Separating what you value and what you want your life to be about from what everyone else is doing is critical. You may not know what the point of life is, but you can start by defining what it isn't. And if you want more on that, Kristen wrote a blog back in January of 2019 that you should scroll back to. And number 3, you have to become okay with uncertainty and trust that things are working out even when you can't fathom how. This is a daily practice and one that I'm very much still working on too. Our favorite introduction to this topic is the book Outrageous Openness. We did a book club episode back in November of 2018 about it. I really, really, really want you to check that out. If you can concentrate on those things, becoming someone who has a strong connection to their own inner wisdom, who has a solid definition of purpose that they're living according to, and who trusts that the universe has their back, then you are on your way to easing existential loneliness. And from that place, it's much easier to ease social loneliness. Because when you know who you are, what you want, and you trust the universe to have your back, then you become a magnet for the type of friends, partners, jobs, and other connections that you so deeply crave. Not only that, but your confidence in yourself, your path in life, and in the universe to support you along the way means you can breathe through the moments of loneliness, fear, and uncertainty that are bound to come up. And they will, because that's what it means to be human. But you won't feel so compelled to grab for distractions. And maybe one last way to say it is this. Work on becoming the kind of grounded, purposeful, confident person you want to be so that you're a match to people and experiences who can rise to that same level. So, what's your take on loneliness? Are you in the social or existential camp right now? Or maybe both? Come share with me in the comments.
Rachel referenced a few previous podcast episodes in her blog, so we wanted to be able to direct you right to them in case you want to hear them directly. So the first one she mentioned was the side chat we did back in June 2019, honing your intuition and knowing when it's really fear.
The second thing I mentioned was a blog that Kristen published back in January of this year called Here's What I Know for Sure Is Not the Point of Life.
And the last one of my favorite bonus book club episodes that we have done, Outrageous Openness by Tosha Silver, which we did back in November of 2018.
Okay, that's it. I really recommend you guys go listen to those because Kristen doesn't know this because she hasn't listened to my blog yet at the time we're recording this, but I made a list of 3 things, and these are like the 3 episodes I think people should listen to if they want help with those 3 points that I
deeper
made.
dives into them.
Yeah. So, okay, that's that. And we will be back on Friday with a new interview with a normal person. It's been a while since we just had a one-on-one interview with a normal person, because last month, if you'll remember, we did our roundtable about people pleasing with our friends Joanna and Stacy.
Yep.
So it's been a while. So do you want to give them a little, break them off a little, preview of the remix? Sorry, I got into my Ignition remix. I really shouldn't be talking about R. Kelly.
No, probably not.
God.
No.
Okay. Well, forgive me.
Timing. Too soon. Yes, on Friday, I am interviewing a previous client of mine. Her name is Francine. And she emailed me earlier this year just to give me an update and ask for a recommendation about something. And she told me what's been going on for her the past few years since we coached. And I was like, that is an incredible story. Her life just doesn't even look remotely like our last conversation 4 years ago. And so I wanted her to tell the story of how she really made her life look completely different in 4 years.
This happens a lot with normal people, is they email us an update, and I'm like, I want to talk about that. Will you please come on the podcast? And they're not like, they weren't expecting it at all. And then they're like, oh,
yeah, she was not expecting that at all.
Right.
But just to give you a little teaser for why you should listen on Friday, one of the things that she did was take a year-long sabbatical from her job to travel the world and just explore and live in different countries. And she would be the first one to tell you, I can't do that. That's crazy.
Who does that?
4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then she did it. So, maybe listen in and see how that happened.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Okay, well, we will see you on Friday for Francine.
See you then.